Finally coming back to this concept after 5 months, it's about time to take a look at the world of Gatchaman Eternal. In case you forgot, this is a hypothetical reimagining of the 1970s anime series Science Ninja Team Gatchaman. And in case you forgot about that too, I made a neat little video explaining all the basics. There's a link in the description if you want to check it out. Otherwise, let's get started with part 1. The first thing I decided to do here was streamline the Gatchaman concept by changing the way these heroes operate on a technical level and tying a lot of the visual themes together, particularly the bird themes. For example, throughout the series, the Science Ninja Team's most powerful finishing move is the Hinotori, Firebird, where they combine the power of their vehicles to turn the god Phoenix into a literal flaming phoenix that can destroy anything in its path. How and why the ship can do something like this is left up to the viewer's imagination. However, when I looked at that Firebird image, I immediately thought, you know what other iconic image in this show resembles a bird made of fire? Our main antagonist. I have no idea whether this was intentional, and maybe it's just me, but I think Sosai X's abstract design really does look bird-like. And the first rule of streamlining a concept is that there's no such thing as coincidence. If our main protagonists and antagonists share a Firebird theme, we need to think of a reason why. And the reason that I came up with is that they all share the same origin. Allow me to explain. So this idea came from something that happens at the beginning of Season 3, Gatchaman Fighter. Our heroes and the rest of the world think that Sosai X was destroyed at the end of the previous season, but in reality, a small piece of him was left behind. This piece was eventually able to grow and regenerate into a new being called Sosai Z. And this phenomenon, for a part of the original alien to split off, gather materials to house itself, and become its own entity, eventually became the basis of the new Gatchaman system. In this version, everything starts with Sosai X landing on Earth, several years before the start of the story. While he's moving through our atmosphere, several pieces of him break off and fall to the Earth separately. Most of them burn up before landing, but 5 of them remain alive, lying dormant in the ground until 5 special people eventually find them. I'm sure you see where I'm going with this. In the meantime, Sosai X is launching his invasion of the Earth, and the International Science Organization is formed to try and find a way to stop him. One day, one of its top scientists, Dr. Nambu, is investigating the area believed to be Sosai X's initial landing site, and he suddenly happens upon this strange alien life form that looks like a living flame, hiding in the rubble. He manages to befriend this little creature and take it back to study it, calling it a Gacha Sprite. The Gacha Sprites all shared Sosai X's abilities, namely the ability to gather and reshape surrounding materials to construct new technology at will. And if they form a connection to a human being, they can essentially share that ability with them, creating special clothing, vehicles, and tools for them to use. If you didn't see where I was going with this before, you have to be seeing it now. So anyway, one day the ISO's headquarters is attacked by Galactor, and during all the chaos this first Gacha Sprite gets loose. While it's zipping around trying to figure out what the heck's going on, it runs into a little boy also trying to escape the building, and uses its telekinetic powers to prevent him from being crushed when the ceiling caves in. Eventually, this little boy, who goes by the name of Ken, is rescued from the wreckage, and Dr. Nambu notices that he has the Gacha Sprite with him. He asks how he managed to survive. Ken explains how the Sprite protected him, and right then and there, the idea of Gatchaman is born. Before we continue, let's take a little design break. So here's Ken in civilian and hero form, with his little sprite by his side. His civilian clothes have been altered a lot to look like the sort of average stuff a kid might wear in the 70s, with a slightly nerdy vibe. Unlike the uniformity of the canon designs, here I wanted each member of the team to have a unique outfit that matched their personality. I kept little numbers though, because I think they're cute, and it was a lot of fun to work them into the designs in different ways. Now the hero design, on the other hand, is almost unchanged. All I really did was round out and simplify the shape language, add a colored wig under the helmet, and add a bit of shoulder armor. I just happen to think that the original Gatchaman designs are kinda perfect the way they are. They're bold, they're iconic, and even though they're fairly uniform, each member gets their own fun color scheme. Despite this, none of the reboots felt like sticking with it, so I figured I might as well be the first. Ken's Gacha Sprite shares his blue character color and is generally the most helpful, well-behaved sprite of the bunch. Unlike the others, it spent years living with its human partner and humans in general, and has a better understanding of what Ken wants it to do at any given moment. This gives a concrete reason why Ken is often the special one, who seems more powerful than everyone else on the team. He and his sprite are just more in sync. Now, on with the story. Fast forward a couple of years later, and Ken is now a young man, who's been training with Nambu and his sprite to become the hero known as Gatchaman. His mission is to protect the people of Earth from Galactor, and eventually rid the planet of its evil. This version of Ken is just as serious and passionate as the original, but he's also a bit high-strung and prone to emotional outbursts, especially when things don't go the way he expects. Becoming a cool-headed, confident leader will be part of his journey as a character, and he'll gradually learn to work well with others when he starts building his team, starting with his long-lost friend, Joe. The two of them grew up together in the ISO's children's shelter, a place for all the children of its scientists and soldiers, orphaned or otherwise, to be kept safe from Galactor. Joe, as a child of former members of Galactor, is ostracized by almost everyone. Ken is the only kid who doesn't hold his parentage against him, and actually tries to be his friend. Nevertheless, they have a bit of a rocky relationship, which only gets rockier after Ken meets his Gacha sprite and starts spending more time away with Nambu and the other scientists. Although Nambu has been a sort of distant father figure to both of them, suddenly he and Ken start becoming much closer, leaving Joe all alone. Eventually, around the age of 16, Joe leaves the shelter and strikes out on his own, and hasn't been seen since. Ken has always felt a little guilty about this, but tries to put it out of his mind. He's learned from losing his father that it's best to try to forget about people he will probably never see again, and instead throws his whole heart and soul into his hero work, possibly to the point of an unhealthy obsession. One day, he gets some information on the whereabouts of a high-ranking member of Galactor, a mysterious figure called Baird Katse. So he travels out to the desert base where he is supposedly hiding, and gets ambushed by some of Galactor's soldiers, who may or may not have leaked the information about Baird Katse in order to lure him there. Ken is injured but far from helpless, and is about to try to escape, when the soldiers are suddenly taken out by an unknown third party. He looks up and sees a dark caped figure, who speaks to him with a familiar gravelly voice. Time for another design break. Joe's civilian outfit here is truly the archetype of casual 70s fashion, with a mostly skin-tight look that helps those big bell-bottom pant legs stand out. His hero design has slightly altered colors, with a more cool-tone palette to make him look just a bit more cohesive. Also, you may have noticed he's got a ponytail now. So the brightly colored helmet wigs were just an idea I came up with to make my designs totally unique in some way. A few adaptations have toyed with the idea of letting Jun's hair stick out of her helmet because she is girl, but none of them really ran with it as an idea for the whole team. So I decided to give it a shot, and I liked it. Partly because it serves as an additional layer of protection for their secret identities, and partly because it gives me a chance to dramatically change how the characters look when they're in hero mode, and add a little more of my personal taste to their character concepts. For example, I mentioned in the Gatchaman primer that Joe always felt like the pet character of the franchise, so I decided to take this opportunity to give him some of my favorite guilty pleasure character traits, and I just really love tough guys with long hair. Finally, we come to Joe's Gacha sprite, who clearly looks a little less friendly than Ken's. The Gacha sprites are basically just cute mascot entities. They don't talk or anything, but the little personality that they do have is heavily derived from whoever they decide to connect with. So because this sprite connected with Joe, it's imprinted on him and tends to copy his tough guy mannerisms and expressions. The rest of the Gacha sprites will imprint on their partners accordingly, as you'll see in future videos. So back to the story. Ken and Joe take a brief moment to catch up, with Ken explaining his mission and Joe explaining how he came to be a hero as well, after his Gacha sprite saved him from a bad car wreck during an off-road race. Joe has heard of Ken's activities as part of the ISO's Gatchaman project, and has often been mistaken for him during his solo missions. But so far he has no desire to join him or become a hero in any official capacity, preferring to work by himself. Nevertheless, he grudgingly agrees to help Ken just this once, since both of them are eager to find out whether Baird Katse might actually be in the area. And if not, the least they can do is mess with Galactor's plans by blowing up the base, so together they sneak into the building. I think Ken and Joe's strained relationship would really start to show itself at this point, with Ken initially being really happy and thinking they can pick up right where they left off, but eventually becoming frustrated with Joe's resentful attitude and unwillingness to cooperate. And Joe would feel that Ken is an overly meticulous control freak who's also delusional if he thinks they could still be friends after all this time. Needless to say, the mission probably wouldn't go very well. I think a fitting climax would be for them to end up captured and brought to Baird Katse. And after meeting him and finding out what a bloodthirsty and maniacal supervillain he is, they finally decide to put aside their differences and work together to escape. Afterwards, Ken would ask Joe to come back to the ISO, at least to let Dr. Nambu see him again and learn about his abilities. And after taking a moment to consider it, Joe agrees. Now that the story is over, let's go through the rest of today's designs, starting with Dr. Nambu. I've actually always kinda liked Dr. Nambu's design. It's simple yet recognizable, with a cute color scheme. It doesn't say too much about his character, but it works, and it already fits well into the softer, more playful atmosphere of Gatchaman Eternal. So I had to come up with something else to change about his character, particularly his body type and silhouette. I thought it would be fun to make Nambu a big character, to visually communicate his role as the father figure of the team and the leader of the ISO. The tinted glasses are just an extra detail to make him look sort of fashionable and modern. Next up, Berg Katse. This was the first design where I decided to lean very heavily on shape language, to really emphasize that triangle motif, even in the shape of his body. As a result, he ended up looking kind of hulking and muscular compared to everyone else in the cast, which makes him feel like a more threatening character than he is in the canon. But that works just fine for me. I don't mind my cartoon villains actually being scary. You're going to see in future videos that I've reconceptualized most of the villains to be a little more powerful and active in the story than their canon counterparts. For example, rather than just having him be a master of disguise, I decided to go one step further and make Berg Katse an actual shapeshifter. One who can not only modify the shape of his body to be shorter or taller or more masculine or feminine or anything in between, but one who can also take on the physical characteristics of different animals and use their abilities in a fight. I think this way, he really feels like the mutant henchman of an alien invader, and a fearsome person in his own right. Last but not least, here's Sosai X, one of the first designs I ever drew for this idea, because I just love him that much. His original abstracted bird design is not only the most unique and recognizable in the series, but it's also the one where he had the most personality. He's really not that memorable as a villain, but it felt like they actually put in the effort to give him a handful of random fun moments in that first season, and I wish they'd kept that up throughout the series. Anyway, here I decided to really exaggerate all the elements of that first design that I enjoyed. His weirdly undefined body is now a very obvious stylized flame, and his face and eyes can stretch and emote more clearly. This version of Sosai X is a little bit more involved in Galactor's activities. He's still going to stay in the background, but when he does talk to his henchmen, he's going to have actual conversations with them, rather than just occasionally popping in to give them a new strategy. Partly because, like the Gacha sprites on the Heroes team, he is personally responsible for giving them their special powers, and creating most of their super weapons and mecha monsters himself, the way he does in Gatchaman F. And also partly because, as I said before, his henchmen aren't quite as subservient as they are in the canon. These versions of them are more self-reliant and defiant, and not afraid to argue with him if he orders them to do something they don't want to do. He actually has to put some effort into keeping them in line, which will require him to talk more and show more emotion, but you'll hear more about that some other time. Anyway, thank you for watching! Next time on Gatchaman Eternal, we're going to be looking at more designs and fun ideas for Jun the Swan, Gel Sadra, and Red Impulse. Like, subscribe, whatever, and check out my Ko-fi page to see all the finished pictures in these videos. Till next time!